as long as I'm running down the state list of what the fuck.
Is it going to be more ugly?
Oklahoma Republicans suggest turning kids over to ICE if they don't speak English.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
My favorite comment at the page was, that's right, they need to grab and like drag in all of those deaf children.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that, you know, and that's, they just don't even think before they open their mouths. There were so many layers of wrong with that, you know, starting with no national language. So why is this even coming up? And, you know, honestly, you just, is anybody even confused about what language they're listening for? Right. This is like what I was saying before about the, you know, God in the schools, and no, it's not the Christian God. And it's like, oh, you're not going after the Hispanic population, right? I mean, this is about, if you heard someone speaking Norwegian, you would totally be all over that. Like, no, I think there's no doubt who we're talking about, because they're getting completely maligned recently more than ever. Completely tons of dishonest fear-mongering happening toward the Hispanic community, and this is really, really unacceptable.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a horde of rapists on the way from Honduras.
I was so I mean, so they're leaving because of political violence and fear over political violence and other issues as well. And the way he described it made it sound like they were the violent people. And it's like, no, that when you're talking about these levels of rape, you're talking about within the political violence sphere that they're leaving, right?
Yeah.
So, but what he actually said, and what it sounded like, I'm sure, to the people listening, was, you're saying that this is like a horde of rapists coming across the border. It's like, no, this is a horde of women and children and some men that are trying to get away from a violent situation. I mean, if you're going to sit there and say that you don't want rapists to be allowed in this country, and you're going to equate these people with racists, and then you're going to say you don't want rape victims allowed in this country, and we're going to equate that, you know.
Well, but they bring the rapists with them, right?
I don't know what this is. It's like, it was so disheartening. And it reminded me of how they go on and on about the horrible conditions in the sanctuary city. And it's like, no, we are a relatively safe city. Yeah. And also they were doing this thing about the military now is going to be at the border to police documentation. I don't know. They're going to have the military, is the National Guard going to be called out for SAT testing now, make sure everybody has their ID. I mean, I don't know.
Number 2 pencils here.
But they had a woman watering her lawn out in front of her house in Laredo, and they were interviewing her, and she's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I keep hearing about all this, you know, horrid violence that I'm supposed to be. And she goes, I'm just watering my lawn. Like, you know, it's...
Well, yeah, and to be clear, the he that you're referencing is our Twitterer-in-chief, who, like, makes these bizarre statements. There's a caravan of migrants, refugees from Honduras. They're making their way through Mexico. They're hoping to find sanctuary in the U.S. And again, they're fleeing political violence. And anyway, a lot of this came as a misquote from an L.A. Times article that talked about all the sexual violence that a lot of these migrant women have experienced in Honduras. And one of the reasons they want to come here is to get away from that. Yeah. And so his response is, well, let's send them back into that environment, because how else can you care for a rape victim than to send them back to wherever they got raped in the first place, right? But the other thing is, this whole idea of sending the National Guard to the border, we've done this before. This is not a new idea. It's been done forever because, you know, we've got relatively porous borders. They're far less so than they used to be. But, I mean, I remember back in the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton, he sent some troops to augment the Border Patrol. It's been recycled over and over again. And the last time it happened, where there was like a big push, it was a disaster because there were armed National Guard troops on the border, and they actually shot a U.S. citizen who was there legally at the border. And so it's a big deal. And this is a bad idea because Border Patrol is not a military mission. We have a law enforcement agency that's charged with that specific mission. Right. It is a law enforcement function.
Yeah. We have Border Patrol agents.
Yeah.
We do have people tasked with patrolling the border.
Who are specifically trained for this.
And if you need more, hire more.
Right. And the U.S. military is not trained for that mission. And you cannot use the military for law enforcement in, except under very limited circumstances, and we don't have those circumstances on the border.
I want to mention, it says here, states including Montana and Nevada, each led by GOP governors, refused to send troops to aid the president's efforts, calling the move a whim and inappropriate use, respectively, even as Trump is working to halt the steadily increasing rate of illegal crossings. So there's a couple states that are declining to participate, led by GOP governors. I honestly don't know who's got the jurisdiction. Like, I don't know ultimately if the National Guard goes out of a state base. I mean, it's called the National Guard. So, I'm like, well, my first thought would be
the National Guard actually is that's state troops. They report to the governor of the state.
Okay.
So the only way you can get National Guard troops is if you federalize those guard units, and you can't federalize individual guardsmen. You have to federalize, basically call up the entire unit. So that's why in the Vietnam War, when people were looking for exemptions, they tried to get in the National Guard versus the reserves. Individual reservists can be mobilized for specific jobs. Only entire units from the National Guard can be mobilized because the governor actually...
So if the governor says, I'm not sending them, and the president says they're going, how does that work?
Then he would have to go to Congress, and Congress would have to declare some kind of emergency or whatever to mobilize guard units from that state.
That's interesting.
Well, the other thing is there's no clue about how he's going to pay for this either, because you have to pay them. The state doesn't. If it's like
I hear
federal,
the Pentagon has tons of extra money.
They got some extra money.
Oh.
Yeah, Mattis must wake up every morning and look at the Twitter feed and just
Pull the covers back over his head?
you're just like, what the fuck?
It's amazing what funding can suddenly be found for.
Yeah.
As opposed to other things like education or, don't have the money for that, but got the money for this.
Yeah.
So